After months of teasers, news and ads, we are finally getting to drive the new Kia Tasman Ute here on Australian roads, and in this video we're going to tell you if it's any good. It looks very much like a Kia SUV, big twin screens. It will struggle when you're towing and you're pulling a load. The ride is actually quite good off-road. It's not tossing you about as much as you might get in some rival utes. This is the company's first entrant into the very hotly contested dual cab ute market, going up against Hilux, Ranger, D-Max, Triton, all the really big names of what is a very busy and popular segment of the market. In this video, we're going to go through what it's like inside of this car. It's quite spacious for a dual cab ute, talk about what you get for the money, and of course see what it's like to drive on-road as well as off-road, and if you should buy one over one of its many rivals in this space. Let's get started. 11 variants of the Kia Tasman are available, from a single cab chassis due in late 2025 to the dual cab chassis arriving now, and the top selling dual cab pickup you see here, or $49,990 drive away for the base S 4x2, rising to this model here, the X Pro off-road flagship, priced from $74,990 before on-road costs. Standard equipment in all models with a tub include LED headlights, twin 12.3-inch screens, a reversing camera, front and rear parking sensors, keyless entry and start, and dual zone climate control. But there's plenty more equipment in higher grade models which we'll detail as we go throughout this review. For a full breakdown of everything the Kia Tasman offers, read the full review and the full pricing and spec story at Drive.com.au. Exterior features on this X Pro include 17-inch black alloy wheels with Hankook all-terrain tyres, unique bumpers shared with the X-Line below it, LED projector headlights, LED tail lights, and black accents. It also gets plenty of off-road goodies to set it apart as a top-of-the-range model, such as an electronic selectable rear differential lock, the X-Trek off-road cruise control system, rock mode joining the other terrain settings, auto, mud, snow and sand, as well as a slight suspension lift and some extra underbody protection. If you're looking to buy a Kia Tasman or any other ute on the market, we have plenty of new and used examples for sale on Drive Marketplace now. Check that out. Arguably the most controversial point around the Tasman is the way it looks. It's fair to say the styling is polarizing. It's probably the most diplomatic way to put it. A lot of people like it, a lot of people don't. I've got to say, I didn't like it at first. I was in that camp of many people who didn't like the way it looks, but seeing it in person, it does help. It does sort of set in as a design. And a lot of the times the cars that look perhaps the most polarizing, the most controversial when they launch, actually age better than a lot of the more sort of traditionally attractive cars. Let's see how that goes over the years. What do you think of the styling? Let us know in the comments down below. But before making your mind up, I would highly recommend looking at one in person because it does make a difference. Now, this one is the top spec X Pro. There are 5 models in the range. And you notice it's finished in this sort of nice hero beige color with body colored wheel arch flares. These are only available on the white and this sort of tan color, and only on dual cab pickup models. I do prefer the look compared to that sort of black plastic you get on the other colors. It does make it look a little bit more conventional and sort of tones down some of the polarizing elements of the styling. Now the Tasman is one of the bigger utes in this class, bigger than say a Ranger, a Hilux, a Triton, some of the big names in this segment, but it's still smaller than say a Canon Alpha from GWM, as well as sort of your full-size American trucks, F-150, Silverado, those kind of cars, but it is still pretty big for a car in this class, quite tall as well. And you notice that on the road, it's got quite a bit of road presence as a result, though it does look a little bit narrow in some of the lower specs in the range. Big tray, put some dimensions on screen right now about how big this car is compared to some of its rivals. But yeah, fair to say the design, probably better in person, and it does grow on you over time. And Kia says its customers are starting to learn the way the car looks and get used to it and actually start liking the fact it's a bit different to some of the other cars in the segment. The theme of space continues to the tray of the Tasman, which is also one of the biggest in the dual cab ute space. The tailgate's not too heavy to raise or lower because it does have some assistance on it there. And it is, as I said, a pretty big tray for the class. Up to 1570mm long, 1600 wide to the edges of the tray. That will depend on the model you go for and whether or not it does have a tub liner in it there as well. This is on the SX Plus trims and up. This one obviously is the top of the range X Pro. 4 tie down points along the place. They're quite rigid and sturdy tie down points. There isn't anything in the back corner there, so it may be a little bit hard to mount sort of low, long and flat items, something like an IKEA flatback or something like that. You get things like a 240 volt power socket on the left hand side, lights, as well as these sort of cool adjustable tie down points there as well for loading various items of different sizes, plus items like steps on the corner of the tray we see on the Ford Ranger as well. There are a few items that you don't see standard on the Tasman X Pro that you do get on some rivals, like say a Ford Ranger Wildtrak or a Hilux Rogue. Things like electric roller shutter, a sports bar, as well as side steps on the side of the vehicle. They are available as accessories through Kia dealers, but not standard equipment on the car, and you do have to pay extra for them on top of what is already a pretty expensive ute by class standards. Kia says it's watching the demand for these options and could add them as standard in the future, but again, time will tell on that, and there's no confirmed plans to do so in the meantime. But overall, there's a lot to like in the back of the Tasman. It's spacious, got plenty of amenities, and yeah, does a pretty good job of doing ute things as you'd expect for a diesel dual cab ute. It's here in the cabin where I reckon the Tasman makes its strongest impression. It doesn't feel like a utilitarian ute like a lot of the cars in this class can. It looks very much like a Kia SUV. Big twin screens, really nice finishes. We'll get onto that in a moment. But first, what do you get for your money in this X Pro grade? Well, it's a pretty long list of features. Features on offer inside the Tasman X Pro include dual 12.3-inch screens, a 5-inch climate control display, synthetic leather look trim, heated and ventilated power adjustable front seats, a sunroof, an 8-speaker Harman Kardon premium stereo, a heated steering wheel, keyless entry and start, and ambient interior lighting. The design of the cabin is probably the first thing that hits you here. Obviously, screens dominate much of the experience, as with many new cars. We've got things like this cool sort of honeycomb look to the air vents, various different storage slots, and really nice materials as well too. Sort of soft-ish up there, soft on the armrests as well as soft on the tops of the doors. It does feel like the $80,000 drive away that you are spending on this top-of-the-range X Pro. There are still physical shortcuts for a lot of the functions in this car. You've got some different things for climate controls down here, temperature as well as your fan speed, as well as a nice sort of volume roller dial under the screen. However, what I'm not such a fan of are these touch-sensitive buttons here below the screen. Things like your map, search function, they're all touch-sensitive and a little bit hard to use while on the move, especially if you say moving the aircon controls and you sort of rest your hand on the thing. It sort of does things you don't really want it to, and it's sort of, yeah, a bit out of place in a ute and not great to see given other cars in the Kia range, the K4 for example, don't actually have touch-sensitive controls for that there. Now that big screen in the middle of the dash does work pretty well. 12.3 inches, it runs Kia's latest software, as you find in a bunch of other cars in the brand's range. Quick to respond, works pretty well. There are a lot of menus to get your head around in this car, but sort of once you've lived with it for a bit, it does become second nature in that regard. CarPlay works pretty well on tests at least. Ahead of me here is a digital instrument display, complete widescreen, bigger than what you get in say a mid-spec Ford Ranger around this price. By normal passenger car standards, it's not the most customizable. You can't do things like a full screen map or stuff like that. But by ute standards, it is really, really good. You got various displays you can choose from in the middle, your tire pressure, your fuel economy, all the kind of stuff you'd expect, as well as a choice of these sort of digitized readouts on the outside or sort of traditional dial looking things there. Works pretty well, nothing to really complain about with that. Between the two screens, you've got this smaller 5-inch display for a number of your other climate controls that aren't down here on these shortcuts. Unfortunately, they are a little bit hard to see while you're driving. The steering wheel rim sort of blocks it, so I can't see a lot of my hand there. This is things like your recirculating air, where the air goes. You can press this button in the top corner that opens it up on the main screen, but yeah, it's a little bit finicky, and I wish they just had sort of a bank of climate controls like you get in a Ford Ranger. The rest of the fundamentals of this cabin are pretty good. You've got a nice steering wheel here. It's quite chunky. It feels quite nice in the hand there as well, with buttons that are pretty easy to use on the move. The seats are quite comfortable as well across the range in all the models we've tried on this launch drive. These ones here, 10-way power adjustable driver as well as for the passenger as well, including under thigh support, which is great, as well as some different functions for heating, ventilation, as well as lumbar control. Nothing to complain about, super supportive, super comfortable. Kia says it benchmarked the Isuzu D-Max in terms of seat comfort and support as one of the better ones in this category in that regard. And I think it has done a pretty good job with that on the whole. That's whether you get the sort of artificial leather seats in this X Pro grade, as well as the X line, or sort of the cloth you get in some of the base model versions of the Tasman. Storage space is pretty good in this car as well. You've got those dual wireless phone chargers that also act as a bit of a storage space for wallets and keys and things like that. 2 cup holders that are pretty good, decent size there as well. A rubberized section, plus a pretty decently sized center console there as well. But there is a bit of a trick to this car that comes in some of the higher grade models. Now, some of the cheaper Tasmans, you get a normal sort of T-bar shifter for the automatic there in the middle of the center console. But higher grades get this sort of wand style shifter here on the right side of the steering wheel. It does take a bit of getting used to, but once you get used to it, it does work pretty well, especially in 3-point turns. What that does do is free up a bit more space in the center console, not only for these wireless chargers, but also for a fold-out table that comes out of the center console, whether you want to work with your laptop or eat some food or do something like that. Cool to see, and a good use of the space that's available in this car. Do something a bit more interesting with it rather than just have sort of some dead storage space there. bit more space there in that armrest as well if you want to keep something out of sight. Glove box is pretty decent size, not huge, but it is a decent size. And you've got a bit more room sort of in the upper glove box in this car. There are no sort of fancy pull-out cup holders like a Ford Ranger, but the cup holders you do get are a pretty good size. And the door bins are also an okay size, quite tall, not the deepest in terms of sort of how wide they are, so you may struggle to fit a big bottle in there, but they are pretty good overall in that regard. And material quality is also quite nice. Soft up here, soft on the dashboard, soft in the places you touch, and yeah, pretty impressed with the cabin of the Kia Tasman. The back seat of the Tasman is another highlight of this car. I'm 186 centimeters tall, or 6'1". This driver's seat is set up for me. You can see I've got plenty of room back here. Enough knee room there, not too much, but still enough for a car of this size. Good headroom there as well, and even some toe room under the front seat with it set all the way down as far as it can go. The party trick though of the X-Line and the X-Pro models is the sliding rear seat. So with a bit of leather under me here, I can slide it forward and it actually reclines the backrest. It does come at the cost of knee room because obviously the seat does slide forward, but if you're shorter or perhaps the driver's a bit shorter, you can actually really stretch out back here and get a far more comfortable experience that you might expect of a ute in this class. That happens in a 60-40 split as well there too. The seat base flips up for more storage, should the door pockets not be enough, while Kia has fitted two 240 volt, 400 watt power outlets in high grade models, one behind the center console in the rear seat area, and another in the tub. Other things worth calling out include a fold down armrest with cup holders, a smartphone pocket on the middle seat base, an ISOFIX and top tether anchors for the outboard seats only. That's pretty common for a ute. Now in terms of amenities and things and storage, you've got little pouch on the top of the front seat back, plus this really cool mat pocket that's actually got a zipper on it. It feels like a laptop pouch, and it's pretty big there as well, but it's not something I've really seen in a new car. It's a pretty cool feature there for sort of keeping things out of sight and perhaps prevent them from sort of falling out of the mat pocket if you're going off-road. Got rear air vents back here, no sort of climate controls, but still rear air vents back there. At least in this X-Pro grade, you've got household power back there, which is pretty good, plus USB-C ports on the seat backs, and also heating for these outboard rear seats, which is something you don't really find on a ute in this size class. That's cool to see here in the Tasman. Other things worth calling out, obviously materials aren't quite as nice in the back, but it's pretty good. It all feels really well built, and things like this sort of knurled door handle feel really nice there as well, both front and rear. And overall, pretty impressed with the back seat of this Tasman. If you're enjoying this video so far, why not give us a like and subscribe so you don't miss any more off-road tests of new utes on the Drive channel. And if you know someone in the market for a Kia Tasman, the best thing you can do is send them this video. We'd greatly appreciate it. There's only one engine available in the Tasman for the time being. It's a single turbo, 2.2 litre diesel 4-cylinder, derived from something like a Kia Sorento SUV or a Carnival People Mover. It has been revised a bit compared to those cars, up a bit on power, 154 kilowatts, that's a match for a Ranger by Turbo. But torque is down on a Ranger. 440 newton meters in this, compared to 500 you get in a Ranger or say a Hilux 2.8 litre diesel. That's all matched with an 8-speed automatic transmission as well as 4-wheel drive, including a 4-auto mode that lets you run in 4-wheel drive on sealed surfaces. What does that all look like on the road, and does this torque deficit really make a difference the way the car drives? Let's find out. All right, the bit we've been waiting for. What is the Kia Tasman like to drive on the road? Now, you can probably hear we're on a very bumpy road at the moment, both in how my voice is straining as well as a bit of rattling from the camera, but it's a good test of what this car is like from a ride and a handling point of view. Now, this is the most Australian Kia ever, as the company says. There's been a lot of work that's gone on local roads to make this car ride as much like an SUV as you can get within its mechanical construction. It is still a ladder frame chassis, got a live axle at the back, obviously independent front, but it is very traditional ute in terms of its makeup. But got to say, it is pretty good in that respect. There's obviously still some firmness in the ride, and it does sort of jitter about at times, particularly over extended stretches of very high frequency kind of bumps you get, say, on a rough road around town. But the body control is quite good, and it sort of takes the sharp edge off bumps that we sort of see in the Ford Ranger. It's one of the reasons why we like the way the Ford Ranger rides. You can still feel bumps, but it's sort of the sharpest bit of the impact is sort of muted by the car. And that's pretty impressive in that regard. It's perhaps not quite as supple as a Ranger, but I think we need a back-to-back test of the two cars to really say conclusively there. But this is definitely near the top of the class in terms of ride and handling. Now, the steering is also tuned here on local roads by Kia Australia engineers. And look, it's got quite a heavy feel to it. It's quite weighty. And obviously to sort of go with the size and the positioning of the car as, a very tough off-road style vehicle, it lacks a sort of lightness of the Ranger that I personally prefer. That makes the car a little bit easier to move around town, but it's not too bad. It's pretty intuitively weighted. Obviously, once you figure out the fact that it is on the heavy side, it's pretty well geared too. It's not too many turns lock to lock. It's sort of about 3 or so lock to lock, which is pretty reasonable for a new ute. Yeah, it's direct, it's intuitive, it doesn't really do anything too bad. Now, you may have just heard the lane keep go off there, which is another area we need to talk about in this car, which is the way the safety systems work. Now, the lane keep is probably the more annoying of the systems, I have to say. Around town, it's not too bad, but on rural roads, it can get a little bit chatty, a little bit snatchy at times, but it's super easy to turn off. Just hold down the button on the steering wheel for a couple of seconds, the light on the dash goes from green to orange, and you're done. It's off. Now, it will turn on when you get back in the car, when you restart the car, but again, super easy to turn off, so I'm not bothered too much by that. The driver attention monitor, which is a camera on the steering column that looks at your eyes and makes sure you're paying attention to the road ahead, is better tuned than earlier Hyundai and Kias we've driven. It does, chime at you if you look at the touchscreen for too long or look at the instrument cluster for a little bit too long. But I didn't mind it too much in this car. It didn't annoy me to the point where I had to turn it off. Though obviously, your mileage may vary there. And I know a lot of drivers, and the research shows as well, don't really love these sort of safety features in modern cars. You've also got a speed limit warning system that will chime when the car thinks you've exceeded the speed limit. It's detected. And I say that because it doesn't always detect the right limit. But again, that is super easy to turn off. Hold down the mute button on the steering wheel for a couple seconds, and it pops up on the touchscreen, speed limit warning sound is off. Kia has really worked on the way these systems work. The ones that they have to keep on by default for ANCAP rules to get 5-star safety rating for certain versions of this car, they're easy to turn off, and if you don't like them, easy to get rid of, and tick in that regard for the Kia Tasman. Now it's time to address probably the biggest weakness of the Tasman in terms of how it drives on the road, which is this engine. Now, as I said before, it is pretty competitive on power with other cars in this class, but it's down on torque. And to be honest, I describe performance as probably just adequate, or even barely adequate for a car of this size. Obviously, it's not miles away from the other 4-cylinder utes in the category, but when you drive, say, a biturbo Ranger or a biturbo Amarok, obviously because they're the same car underneath, you get a sense that you probably do without the V6. It's probably punchy enough for the application in 2025, but this, I would like a little bit more grunt from that engine. It's fine on most of the time, but yeah, just would like a bit more performance when you're overtaking on a country road or just generally getting up to highway speeds. It is matched with an 8-speed automatic transmission, which is down on the 10 speeds you get in a Ranger. It doesn't need to hunt around for gears quite as much, and it is pretty intuitive in how it works. Obviously, it's tuned to be on the lazy side of things. It does fit the character of this car, obviously being sort of more of a tourer and less of a out-and-out sports car, obviously. And you can sharpen up the gearbox's responses in sport mode, but it does the job pretty well. It doesn't really get in your way. It does what you want. We'll find out in the off-road section as well that it is pretty good and pretty well tuned there. You do get paddles as well to take manual control of the gear shifts in this X Pro model at least. Some of the lower grades have a T-bar auto shifter down there with sort of like a Tiptronic mode with a very sort of conventional lever. And it does work pretty well, pretty responsive, does the job. Put my foot down there. Yeah, performance is okay, but again, not standout, and would like a little bit more from this car. And the engine itself is pretty refined. Obviously, you can hear it, and there is some diesel clatter at low speeds, as you'd expect, but it's not sort of overwhelming in the cabin. You can pretty easily drown it out if you're accelerating or putting this car under load just by turning up the stereo as such in this grade, because it is pretty good, the Harman Kardon system in this top of the range X Pro. Now, we did do a little bit of towing with the Tasman on this first drive, only a very short loop and not really anything long distance or particularly challenging for the car. But it is fair to say you can feel the engine is particularly strained in that scenario. It does, it will struggle when you're towing and when you're pulling a load. That was only about 2.5 tons or thereabouts. If you're maxing this car out at 3.5 tons, I think it will struggle a little bit more there. But in terms of stability of the car, it was pretty good. It didn't feel like you were towing a massive van behind you in terms of the way it handled. And there is a general solidity to the way the Tasman drives. It doesn't feel like a small ute. It is obviously not a small ute, but the steering, the way the chassis is tuned, it feels planted and stable, and even sort of hitting quite a pothole road, as you can probably hear under me now. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's really troubled by anything, which is great for a car that you might want to do long distances across Australia in. Some other things to call out: decent visibility from this car. The mirrors are an okay size, good vision out the front. There is a bit of a blind spot over your shoulder there with the way the rear window and the rear side windows have been designed in this car. Also, the brake pedal is quite nice, quite soft, quite progressive, and doesn't really do anything snatchy or really get in your way. It just works like you think a brake pedal would work and doesn't really need any sort of adapting to in this car. On the whole, we're pretty impressed with the way the Tasman performed on the road. We'd like a little bit more grunt from that engine, but it rides well, it handles well, at least by ute standards. There's not a whole lot to dislike about the way the car performs, but what about off-road? Let's find out. In our first drive of a pre-production Tasman earlier this year, we called out an issue with the transmission calibration in low range mode that would see it shift up too early under load, bogging the car down and forcing the transmission to downshift again to find some power and climb the obstacle. Have they fixed the issue? All right, so off-road now in the Kia Tasman. This is the X Pro model, as you've seen throughout this video. Car's in 4-low, got rear diff lock activated as well, and I put it into its rock mode, exclusive of this particular model in the range, and does some things with traction control that we'll find out in a minute. So starting off on a reasonably steep downhill section that we've got here on this initial drive. So just riding the brake, wheel straight, and it's just doing a pretty good job. Low range is keeping it in check, and yeah, feels pretty stable. The ride is actually quite good off-road. It's not sort of tossing you about as much as you might get in some rival utes in this class. Now what I want to try out is Kia's X-Trek feature. So that's sort of its off-road cruise control, similar to what you get in like a crawl control in a Toyota, for example. So I press X-Trek, got to be in low range mode for that to work. So it's on, I release the brake pedal, grinds a bit, that's just the brakes working. Now you've got 5 different speeds of this that you can choose from. So I've got it in its sort of standard speed, and it's barely, like it's not even showing 1 on the speedo, it's that slow. It's really good for particularly loose surfaces, but I can bump it up a bit. I'll put it into speed 2 here, sort of doing 3 k's an hour. Speed 3, I reckon that'll do 6. Yeah, doing 5 or 6, holding its speed pretty well. And yeah, obviously it makes a bit of noise, as it sort of has to when it rides doing what it does with the brakes, but it's actually really impressive. And this actually works uphill as well. When we do an uphill ascent in a moment, I will do it myself just to show you, but yeah, it does a really, really good job, and it basically takes a lot of the effort out of doing some pretty hardcore off-roading, which is pretty cool, and basically makes, you know, off-road novices look like they're super experienced, which is really great for a car like this. Yeah, the ride is good, the gearbox is doing kind of what I want, it all just sort of works really well, and yeah, the software on the downhill is very impressive. But what about the uphill? So now on the uphill with the Tasman, this is a pretty steep and rocky climb. It's not probably the most hardcore you could possibly find, but still a pretty good test of what the car can do. Again, low range, diff lock, and that rock mode. So not using the X-Track, just using my right foot to control things. Modulating the throttle there, it's just sort of walking up it. A bit of traction control intervention I can see on the dash and feel as well, but it's just doing a good job. Holding its gear, oh, bit of movement, but climbing up that pretty easily. Traction control's working away. I'll see if I can lock it in first gear. Okay, it's not sort of automatically upshifting all the time. It will auto upshift if you sort of give it too many revs. It won't hold the gear forever. That's something we pointed out in our initial drive of this car and of the pre-production car, that it was sort of upshifting when you didn't want it to. That's definitely been improved, but it won't hold the gear forever in low range. Bit of movement, bit of traction control, bit of sort of fidgeting around, I suppose. But yeah, it's really confident, rides great, it just walks up anything. And obviously we're on standard road pressures here, haven't aired down at all. And yeah, just doing a fantastic job. So this Tasman, especially in this X Pro trim, haven't driven the other cars on this course, is a pretty awesome ute off-road. But keen to see how it shapes up against its rivals in the coming months when we get this car through the Drive Garage for a bit more of an in-depth test. The X Pro we're testing here quotes an approach angle of 32.2 degrees, a ramp over angle of 25.8 degrees, a departure angle of 26.2 degrees, ground clearance of 252 millimeters, and 800 millimeter wading depth. On your screen is how those numbers compare to the top-selling Ford Ranger. It sits taller than other models in the Tasman range, and variants below it, as well as the X-Line grade, have a different front bumper with an added lip along its bottom edge, which improves pedestrian protection in a collision and helps it get a 5-star safety rating, but helps cut the approach angle to 20 degrees. It's not often that a car company enters a new segment of the market and knocks it out of the park on its first attempt, but I think that's what Kia has done here with this brand new Tasman. Yes, the styling is divisive and won't be to all tastes, but it's got plenty of space inside, plenty of technology as well to keep up in this class. It's nice to drive, it's got plenty of safety equipment that doesn't always annoy you, which is great compared to some other cars in the Kia range. And all the sort of ute stuff, so to say, payload, towing, off-road capability, is there for what buyers expect in this segment in 2025. But is it faultless? Not quite. We'd like a bit more grunt from that 2.2 litre engine. The touch-sensitive buttons below the infotainment screen are a little bit too fiddly for our tastes, and it would be nice to see things like side steps, a sports bar and a tonneau cover in the price of the X Pro. But on balance, this is a really impressive new ute that's up there near the top of the class with the likes of the Ford Ranger. Is it better than the Ranger? Well, we look forward to finding out very soon. And so you don't miss that video when it goes live, hit that subscribe button down below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and let us know what you think of the Kia Tasman in the comments down below. If a diesel ute isn't for you and you're after one of the new plug-in hybrids in this category, click up there to watch us put some of the newest options up head to head.